If there is no self, who is born and who dies? The resounding answer from the Buddha. Part 1. Unveiling the mystery of no self. If there is no fixed self, then who is reading these lines? Who is feeling the curiosity, the skepticism, or the spark of hope that just flashed in the mind? This is one of the most challenging questions, a doorway into the very core of Buddhist philosophy. When people first hear the teaching of no self, anatta, many quickly assume they understand it. Some think it simply means nothing exists at all. Others use it as a stock answer, as if saying, there's no self can solve every problem. But this is not what the Buddha was teaching. The truth is deeper, more subtle, and far more liberating. To begin, we need to look directly at what we call the self. In daily life, most of us perceive the self as a solid entity, a solitary captain within, who is thinking, feeling, and acting. This is the I we try to protect, the I we build our life story around. It feels like the owner of this body, the possessor of these emotions, the one making decisions. But the Buddha, with his enlightened wisdom, pointed out that this belief is a profound mistake. He did not say that people don't exist. He did not say that nothing is happening. What he pointed to is this: inside each of us, there is no unchanging, independent self. What we usually call I is actually just a process, a combination of ever-moving parts. It is not one thing, and it is not something we can hold on to. The Buddha explained this clearly through the teaching of the 5 aggregates, skandhas, the 5 streams that create the experience we call a person. Form, body, this physical form, changing every second. Feelings, the pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral sensations that come and go like waves. Perceptions, the way we recognize and label the world, always shifting depending on our perspective. Mental formations, the mental patterns. Habits, memories, intentions, a ceaseless flow of mental energy. Consciousness, the awareness, the knowing, that is not fixed. It arises depending on conditions. These 5 streams are like a miraculous dance, constantly transforming. None of them are stable. None of them can be called me in any lasting way. The body changes, feelings rise and fall, perceptions shift, thoughts come and go. We usually don't see this. We cling tightly to the idea that there is someone behind it all, a true self. But the Buddha showed this to be an illusion. It's like building a house of sand and believing it will last forever. There is a structure, but it is temporary. The biggest misunderstanding of no self is that it means nihilism. But the Buddha never said there is nothing. He said there is no permanent self. There is still a body, feelings, thoughts, actions, and life. But these are not owned by anyone. They are part of a process that is always moving, always dependent on causes and conditions. The Buddha's teaching does not ask us to repeat words. It invites us to observe for ourselves, carefully. What is the I'm protecting? Who is the one I'm holding on to? Is there really someone there? When we begin to see this, the way we look at life changes. But this is just the beginning. If there is no permanent self, then what exactly is born? Part 2. If there is no self, what is truly born? Once we begin to understand that the self is not a solid entity, another question naturally arises. If there is no permanent self, then what is actually born? Most people grow up with the belief that birth means a soul or a fixed person enters a body. They imagine that life begins when something like a spirit enters the world and lives inside this body, carrying its identity from one life to another. This feels very personal. I came into this life. But this is not how the Buddha described birth. He taught that birth does not need a soul to appear. What we call birth is simply the moment when conditions come together in a certain way. There is no solid self that arrives. There is only a temporary pattern taking shape. To help us see this, the Buddha explained the teaching of dependent origination. In simple terms, he showed that birth happens because of a chain of conditions. It begins with ignorance, not seeing things clearly, which gives rise to mental formations, habits, intentions. From those formations, consciousness arises. When consciousness meets a new set of conditions, like the parents' bodies, birth takes place. But what is born is not a soul, and not a fixed person. What is born is a continuation, like one candle lighting another. The flame on the second candle is neither exactly the same, nor completely different from the original flame. There is no soul of fire that jumps from one candle to the other. There is only the continuation of energy, of karma, of momentum. Karma is the force of intention and action. Karma is like the wind pushing the waves. The shape of each wave changes, but the movement continues. In this way, what is born is not you, in the way we usually think. What is born is the result of conditions shaped by past actions, but not owned by anyone. Some may feel uncomfortable with this idea. If I am not a fixed self, does my life even matter? But this question comes from the old habit of wanting to make the self permanent. The value of life is not in its permanence. The value is in how we live, in how we touch the world, in the choices we make right now. Birth is not the start of a fixed self. It is the unfolding of causes. But if birth is just the continuation of conditions, then what about death? If no one was really born, then what does it mean for life to end? Part 3. If no one is born, what truly ends? If what is born is not a fixed self, then what does it mean to die? This question often sits quietly in our hearts. Even when we begin to understand that life is a process, the thought of death still feels deeply personal. There is often a silent fear that when death comes, everything will simply vanish, that we will disappear as if we were never here. But most of the time, what people truly fear is not death itself. It is the fear of being forgotten. We are afraid that no one will remember our story, that our small life will leave no trace. The Buddha taught that this fear is built on a misunderstanding. He did not say that death is the complete end of everything. But he also did not say that there is a permanent soul that continues forever. He carefully warned us not to fall into either extreme, believing in total annihilation or believing in an eternal self. When the body dies, the arrangement we called a person naturally comes apart. The 5 aggregates, body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness, dissolve. But this does not mean life disappears into nothingness. It simply means the temporary shape we used to call me is no longer held together. What remains after death is not someone, but the silent traces of a life. When a flower fades, its scent still lingers in the air. When a voice stops, its echo can still be heard. When a person passes, the impact of their kindness, their choices, their actions, all of these remain in the lives they touched, not as something owned, but as a quiet ripple moving through time. There is no solid self that death can take away. There is no permanent person that can vanish. What we fear losing was never a fixed thing to begin with. The life we protect is not something we can lock in place. It was always moving. The fear that we might become nothing is built on the belief that there was ever a solid me to begin with. When we let go of that belief, we can meet life and death with more softness. Death is no longer the loss of someone. It is the quiet release of something that was never truly ours. Birth and death are not opposite doors. They are simply 2 parts of one great cycle. When we see this, death no longer feels like being thrown out of life. It feels like quietly returning to life in forms we do not need to own. Part 4. The subtle trap of the spiritual ego. A strange thing often happens on the spiritual path. After some time, people feel they understand no self. They hear the question, if there is no self, who is born and who dies? And they quickly reply, no one. They believe they have reached the answer. But sometimes, this quick answer hides something they don't see, the silent return of the ego. At first, we protect the story of me. But after hearing the Buddha's teaching, we may slowly let go of that story. The danger is that the ego doesn't truly disappear, it simply changes its position. It moves from, I am someone, to, I understand that there is no one. It now begins to protect a new story, the story of being someone who understands. This is the silent trick of the ego. It doesn't need to say, I am special, anymore. It can hide inside the thought, I have no self. It can quietly enjoy being the one who knows, feeling a little bit higher than others who still seem confused. The ego doesn't care what we believe. It only cares about survival. It can wear many clothes, the achiever, the victim, the student, and even the one who has seen through the self. True wisdom is not about collecting the right answers. It is a gentle openness, a constant softening where nothing needs to be defended anymore. When understanding becomes another thing we try to own, we are still trapped. We have just built a more clever prison. The solution is not to fight the ego or feel guilty when it appears. The key is to notice it gently. Honestly, when we see it clearly without needing to attack it, it begins to loosen. We no longer need to hold on to the identity of the one who understands. Part 5. So, how should we live? When we begin to see that there is no solid self to defend, a quiet space starts to open in life. But this also leaves a very human question. If there is no fixed me, then how should I live? What matters in a life where nothing can truly be owned? The Buddha taught that real freedom is not about chasing every desire or escaping every discomfort. Real freedom is freedom from the pressure to constantly react. When we live this way, life becomes lighter, not because it loses meaning, but because we no longer carry the weight of, this must be mine, or, this must be me. Experiences still come, joy and pain still come, but we don't need to hold them so tightly. They can flow through us without becoming who we are. This doesn't mean we become cold. In fact, when we stop protecting the self, we often become more present, more caring. In daily life, this shift can be very simple. Instead of saying, I am afraid, we can notice, fear is here. Instead of saying, I am angry, we can see, anger is present. This helps us see that fear and anger are conditions passing through, not permanent parts of who we are. We can stay with them without drowning in them. Love also changes. It is no longer something we try to control or possess. It is something that moves through us. Something that flows when the walls around me are not so thick. When we don't need to prove who we are, compassion can rise naturally. In the end, life does not need to be held tightly. It was never ours to keep. It was always moving, always changing. And when we see that, we can live more openly, more lightly, and more at peace with what comes and what goes.